Hi, my name's Starsky and welcome to From the Studio on Clubbing TV. In this episode, I'm going to take a look at some of the highlights from 2022. First up, I've got the Pulsar 23 drum machine from Soma, and it's an absolutely magnificent machine, this. If you just look at it, it looks like something from the 1950s. It looks like some sonic super secret that's been hidden in a bunker for the past 50 years. It really has got a life of its own. It's full of character. It's all based on analog circuitry. You touch things and things happen. You've got these crocodile clips. You can add lots of crocodile clips to each of these pins. You can end up with some huge sort of big spaghetti spiral of madness, but everything just sounds really nice. And with even just these 4 voices, you can get really full, rich sounding tracks. It just feels like it's got a life of its own. Every time I have a little play with it, I find something new. There's bags of stuff to do and it sounds really nice. I just can't recommend it enough. It's got loads of connectivity on the back, so you can connect it to MIDI via all these different pins here. You can put MIDI CCs through from your DAW. You can connect it to your Euro rack. You've got individual outputs on the back. You've got a delay. You've got a reverb unit. It's massive, but it's £1,700 or thereabouts. But I got to say, I think it's worth it. I bought this one because I like it so much. Next up is the big synth behind me. And yes, I realise it's ludicrously expensive at £4,700. Hardly anyone can afford to buy one, but it is a full-on luxury item and it is a bit of synth history, which is why I've pulled it up as one of the highlights of 2022. It's not one of the must-buys. It's not going to be your first buy. It's not going to be for the casual synth user, is it? Or, you know, if you've got a little studio set up at home, you're not going to get one of these. You're going to get one of these if you love your synths and if you've been lusting after an Oberheim for the past 20 years, maybe. The cost of used ones are like way over £10,000. So now you can get a new one that's got 4 of the old synths in it, basically for less than half the price of an old one that's probably got issues, and you get a warranty, all the rest of it. They're owned by Focusrite Novation now, so the warranties and stuff are absolutely fantastic. So it wasn't a synth that when I first played it, I thought this is a must-have. I played it, I don't like some aspects of it. We've got this page 2 thing that we play with quite a lot of things are hidden under the hood. It's got loads of space on the front to add more buttons or more knobs, but they wanted to keep strictly to the workflow of the 80s classics. They wanted to keep strictly to the aesthetic of the 1980s, and you know, they sold out. They know what they're doing. They know more about manufacturing, designing and selling synths than I do. So at this price, it's definitely not a must-buy item of 2022, but it's definitely a highlight. So from something that's really expensive to something that's really good value, and that's the East Beast and the West Pest from Create.
The air attack warning sounds like this is the sound.
And these are just really nice sounding, amazing value little semi-modular units. In each of these you get about 3, I suppose, Pittsburgh modular modules. You've got, on this one, which is the East Beast, we've got an oscillator, a filter and an envelope, and on the West Pest we've got an oscillator, a waveform console and a dynamics controller. And if you remember the synth guy from my demo a few weeks ago, you'll know that one's East Coast, one's West Coast, one uses subtractive synthesis, one uses wave shaping, so different approaches and different types of sounds completely from each of them. The West Pest is more plucky and a bit more aggressive maybe. The East Beast is much more lush and get all those analog tones that we're really used to. The East Beast uses subtractive synthesis as made famous by Dr. Bob Moog on the East Coast of the United States in the 1960s and 1970s. The West Pest, on the other hand, is inspired by the work of Don Buchla in the 1960s and 1970s. And yes, you guessed it, he worked on the West Coast of the United States of America. And this isn't subtractive synthesis, this takes waveforms and does crazy sciencey things to them to add harmonics. I told you this was going to be a little bit of a lesson. So these are a definite highlight for me for 2022. And another one is the Cobalt 5S from Modal. This literally came out of the blue at the start of the year. It's the smaller sibling of the Cobalt 8, but it's basically the same synth with just a few less voices and a smaller form factor, and it's really neat and it's a very good looking little synth. Unlike the Argon and the Cobalt 8, it's an all digital affair, really clever. The way it starts making the sounds is not by standard analog style oscillators. You've got things like ring mod and sync, things that you'd create after sort of complex modulation on a normal synth. On this, they're your starting points, which means you can get really complex tones out of it. And not only can it do complex things like that, it can do really rich, lush, analog sounding things. It can sound like a great big old synth. Also comes with this app, so you can really dig in and find out what's happening here. You can see all the modulation lanes we get in the sequencer. And that's available as standalone for Mac or Windows, iOS, Android, or it's available as a plugin. So it's a really super little package, all in all. So I've looked at a little digital synth, I've looked at semi-modular stroke modular, I've looked at my favourite drum machine and my favourite big analog synth. Next up is the Polyend Tracker, and that's been my favourite little groove box of the year. And I know you might not consider this strictly a groove box. It hasn't got 16 pads to play, it's got 40 on there, so it might be a little bit more difficult to do some more intricate patterns on your finger drumming, but it is basically a studio in a box. Here we can see we've got our 8 separate tracks in here. If we go to the song mode, we can see we've got an arrangement using different patterns. We go into the patterns, we can see the different things that are happening. We've got 4 different effects per step here. We've got a turquoise, a yellow, a purple and a blue. So with those 4 per step, you've got loads of manipulation. Each step can be a different instrument as well, or a different sample. If we come to instruments, we can see all the different instruments we've got loaded into this track. If we go into the master pages, we can see we've got reverb and delay in here as well. So we've got 8 channels, we've got reverb, delay, we've got loads of effects we can use on those as well. In this performance mode, we've got access to all those effects. Let's put the low pass filter live on everything. So you've got access to loads of real-time performance controls, but what I really like about it is the fact that it's a tracker. So it's a sort of non-linear way of thinking.
These are just numbers. These are just numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10. These are just numbers. These are just numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10.
It's not the same as working in the DAW, it's not the same as working in your studio normally. It's not difficult, it's just another way of approaching things, which means you do things in a different way, which can never be a bad thing. So that brings me to the end of my highlights of 2022. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, don't forget you can catch it whenever you like on our Clubbing TV official YouTube channel on the From the Studio playlist. If you've got any questions, drop me in the comments and I'll see what I can do to answer them, and I'll see you in 2023.